Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the SEAL Asia conference. My name is Anna Tan, and I'm from the Philippines. I represent the Ateneo Center for Social Entrepreneurship, or ACCENT, as everybody calls it. Just to give you a little bit of a background of what ACCENT is and why we're here at this conference. ACCENT is a center housed at the John Gokongwei School of Management at the Ateneo de Manila University. If you recall, yesterday, the opening remarks were delivered by our dean. So the center is committed to contribute to nation building by activating a vibrant social entrepreneurship sector in the Philippines through the development of an ecosystem comprised of multi-sector partners that support programs in research, education, training, and advocacy. So we're really very happy and pleased to take part in events such as these. ISEA being a very strong partner of ACCENT. And I hope that everybody enjoyed the first day where it was very informative and insightful. So I just like to give you a recap of the first day we had, and I bear for your indulgence as well because this is going to be a long recap. As you recall, we had a very long day yesterday. So just to start off, we started out with a keynote address from Ms. Armida Salcia Alijabana. She's the UNESCO Executive Secretary, and she opened her keynote address by noting how the social entrepreneurs have stepped up in response to the pandemic and how these initiatives are more critical than ever. UNESCO highlighted 3 policy priorities to promote social entrepreneurship, and these are the promotion of social values for social goals, scaling up innovative solutions to support the growth of social entrepreneurship, and support of startups to leverage the potential of technology. The second keynote speaker was Mr. Duke Dispanada of Social Enterprise Thailand, and he described how the world is already facing challenging times, even before the pandemic, and these are in 2 fronts: income inequality and climate change. With the impact of COVID-19, it makes things more difficult, with the grassroots being hit the hardest. He also said that the pandemic has taught us that the way we live is not very sustainable. He also pointed out that there is a real need to rebuild a world towards sustainability, and that social entrepreneurship has the potential of creating a louder voice. It has a job to push its agenda at the global scale, leading others towards building up better. We then moved on to the first plenary, where our first speaker, Bishwa, presented Asia and the Pacific SDGs Progress Report for 2020. And this report revealed 4 key findings. And these are: Asia Pacific region is not on track to achieve any of the 17 SDGs by 2030. Progress is uneven across the 5 sub-regions. The region lacks progress on environmental sustainability, and the lack of data undermines the monitoring of progress towards the SDGs. We then moved on to the sharing of Chetna Sinha, entitled My Courage, My Capital, which is another story of grassroots women leaders who trained in digital literacy and are leading the rural grassroots movement. It has reached almost 1 million women coming together to do extraordinary things and teaching us simple solutions. In moving forward the SDGs, Chetna remarked to remember these women from rural areas who can be our leaders. We then also had Dr. Lisa Dakanay, where she presented 5 platforms, namely We Live Food, Decent Work for All Sustainable Value Chains, Health for All, Rural Revitalization, Youth and Social Entrepreneurship, and Technological Innovations. These platforms hope to contribute to SDGs linked to pandemic recovery. For Plenary 2, we started off with Vi Reyes from the Philippine Coffee Alliance. She shared the community-based coffee social enterprises and their work in the whole value chain of coffee in the Philippines. They saw the need to build a coffee roasting machine available for coffee-producing communities by inventing air roasting as compared to the traditional roasting controlled by big players in the coffee value chain. We also heard the experience of GreenNet Thailand, where another case of empowering small producers in the value chain was shown. It organized farmers at the village level, introduced young farmers to the scheme, knowledge and technology sharing through practical training on organic farming techniques. It practices fair trade with guaranteed minimum prices and price premium above market prices in its supply chain management. We then heard back from Lisa, who led the launch of We Live Food, a multi-stakeholder platform on women empowerment, livelihoods, and food and agricultural value chains, and its relevance to food security, resilience, sustainable livelihoods, health, and women's empowerment. After this plenary, we had three reactors. They were Sita, Erin, and Ray Jelly. Sita from the ASEAN Secretariat says, women empowerment also means addressing their protection amid the COVID pandemic, as its impact goes beyond affecting the supply chain. ASEAN has also been working on the reinvigoration of rural sectors, especially in infrastructure and investment. It is addressing all these, but help at the national level is very important. Erin from Grow Asia says, shared point around local and regional food system promotions. She sees an opportunity for national government to step forward on schemes to support consumers. She also sees a growing number of young farmers, but they want access to technology. There should be a focus on organic standards and certification, digital marketing platform, mobile money, and vital financial services that are relevant in the COVID-19 recovery. And it's an opportunity to scale up benchmarks. Finally, Ray Jelly underscored the importance of scaling up the framework for the benchmark of transformative partnership with regard to women empowerment. The last plenary for the day, yesterday, started off with Nasyit sharing the healthcare social enterprise model for Dompet Duafa. Dompet Duafa advocates health for all by comprehensively taking into consideration economic empowerment, social, education, and healthcare services, and advocacy. Kanika, meanwhile, cited creating technologies to create new materials from plastic waste. Her organization upcycles waste, trains urban poor, and increases incomes of urban waste pickers. Lan Ying from China spoke on rural revitalization to realize the concept of ecological civilization as modernization has caused greater impact on rural areas. Finally, Howard explained an artificial intelligence is just as a tool that should be combined with social intelligence to enhance primal empathy, empathic accuracy, and social cognition. We then broke off into sub-plenary groups with different themes and topics, the discussions of which will be shared at the closing plenary today. And now to move on to the keynote speakers for this morning. We were supposed to have two keynote speakers. Unfortunately, Senator Grace Poe from the Philippines will not be able to join us today. She is sending her apologies. She cannot join us because she has budget hearings at the Senate this morning, so she won't be able to be here. However, we are very, very happy and pleased to have another keynote speaker for this morning. He is Professor Wen Taijun. He is a renowned expert on social, economic, sustainable development and rural issues, especially in policy studies on macroeconomic and geostrategy of South-to-South cooperation, inclusive growth of rural and urban integration, regional comparative studies. And it is because he has not only done more than 20 years of policy studies in different central government departments since 1980s, but also oversees research appointed by the World Bank, United Nations, European Union, before he was invited to be a dean in one of the top 10 universities in China, Renmin University. He has received the State Council's Award for Outstanding Contribution in 1998, China Central TV Annual Award to Top 10 Economic Talent in 2003, Beijing Municipal Government Award of Outstanding Study Outcome in both 2010 and 2012, and the Ministry of Education Award on Outstanding Contribution of Social Science Studies in 2015. He has more than 30 books published, and the most influential books include 8 Crises, Lessons from China 1949 to 2009, 3 Agrarian Issues, Local Governance, and Goodbye to Centenary Radical Development. He is the thought leader in contemporary rural reconstruction movement of China and the primary mover for rural revitalization in China. Professor Wen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. And happy to be here with you online. And I'm sorry that I'm good at English speaking. And so maybe I will have some mistake. Hope you forgive me. And because my speaking on the social enterprise is not exactly use the concept in the Western world. I think that South country, we need to understand what is our own history and what kind of social enterprises taking place in our own history. So in the, take China as the case. You may know that in 19th century, China separated by this so-called imperialist country, and then many times attacked by this big power. So because of such kind of situation, the original 19th century's enterprises in China that indicated by the Third International, by the Marxist, and they named China Revolution as a kind of national capitalist revolution. So at that time, the capitalists, I mean, these are businessmen, these are entrepreneurs. If they join the national revolution, they are, I mean, they are the social entrepreneurs, because the aim is for the liberation of the country, and they contribute a lot for the revolutions. So from the 19th century to 20th century, more than 100 years, originally we have many enterprises join the revolution. They are somehow the social entrepreneur, but we never indicated these entrepreneurs as a kind of social entrepreneur. And since then, and when China founded as a kind of sovereignty, and they started the industrialization, and from the beginning of 1950, at that time, we have no private entrepreneurs. All the enterprises belong to the state, belong to the whole people. So at that time, the ownership in China is only the whole people's ownership. But in the countryside, we have a so-called collective ownership, means that all the members in a village, they are owner. And then they set up their business in name of the collective, but indeed it's for the social development, for the whole people's welfare, not for private, not just somehow like the Western enterprises. So since 1950, when China founded their new state, new authority, they started their construction mainly by whole people's ownership or the whole villagers' ownership. So such kind of enterprise, not in name of social enterprise, but indeed, especially in the countryside, when the whole villager join this organization, working for their own social welfare, for their own benefits, it still be a kind of localized enterprise and for social social aim. So such kind of historical economic events, we need to carry out our studies to know that how these social enterprises change themselves for the people and for the local and for the sustainability. So if we think about the history, I mean, since 19th century, because of at that time, a lot of the national capitalists, a lot of local enterprises joined the revolution for the independence. So such kind of revolutionaries, I mean, part of the revolutionaries, they are essentially the businessmen, but their business, their enterprises, not for the privates. And then after the China set up the independence, and then they reorganize the economy and set up the whole people's ownership and the whole villagers' ownership. Most of these all of these enterprises, not for benefits some individual, it's for benefits the whole group, for whole country. So such kind of enterprises also can be in name of the social enterprise. And at that time, these managers, they are in name of the so-called employed by the state or employed by the collective. So they are indeed also can be in name of a social entrepreneurs. And after the reform since the 1980s, and we still have a large number of the enterprises belong to the state. And these are state enterprise. The entrepreneurs also cannot work for themselves. Certainly there is some part of these entrepreneurs became corruption people, but large number, the large percentage of these state enterprises still be working for the whole people's interest, not for small group. So that is, if we talk about social enterprise, the concept really starts in the Western countries, but in our developing country, especially in the South, the concept cannot be so simple, duplicate from the West textbooks. So that is, I think that the first I need to emphasize. Second, when we think about what is the COVID-19, you may have read a lot of information from the developing countries. And if you can have the public enterprise or you can have a state enterprise, you may use them as a tool to control the COVID-19, to fight the virus. And if you only have the private sector, so you may not easy to mobilize these private sectors, including of the private enterprises, to join the fighting. So that is a very important enterprise. That is very important experience that we must take into our consideration. So in the South, in developing countries, the key point is that how to mobilize the social resources and how to make the common people join the fighting to protect themselves. That is a very critical issue. So now a lot of people ask me that how China very fast to control the virus. And then I told them that the first, because almost every village in rural China, you may know that we have a 50 to 60% of population still live in countryside. Because that almost all of the villagers still have such kind of historic organization and institution to make them as a member of the collective. So it means that they can be very easy to be mobilized by the village committee, by the collective, and then to block their village, to stop anybody from outside entering the village. So there is almost no people attacked by the COVID-19, by the virus. So it means that almost half of the Chinese people pay zero, means that it's lowest the cost. They don't need to pay the money. They don't need to invite this medical team to go inside. And then if you are just allocated yourself in the big city, you need large number of the government's budget and to organize many medical teams to fight the virus. But if you just stay in the village, you have no worry about such kind of danger. So when the problem happened in China, I was just stay in a village. I don't need to use the masks. I don't need to do anything. I just stay in village and then protect by the almost all the villagers because nobody can enter in. And so that is means it's the lowest cost for self-protection by the social mobilization. So what is such kind of function? So we need to pay attention to the village committee and the village organization and the village self-governance. That is also important for the social resources to be self-mobilized by the self-benefits, by the village in interest. So think about the social enterprise in countryside. Almost every village still can have their heritage from the collectives from originally 1950s. So by such kind of, originally we name such kind of institution as a socialism. But nowadays, we still have a Chinese featured socialism, mainly not in the big cities, mainly in countryside. So when we talk about the rural revitalization, what kind of institution, what kind of organization we need to pay attention, we need to reset up, we need to regenerate. That is still be the collective. So nowadays, just caused not only caused by the wars, but also caused by how to do the revitalization in countryside. Now we are very strong emphasize regenerate the new types collective in the countryside, in rural China. So it's extremely important. I hope you pay attention to such kind of new policy and such kind of new behavior, new implementation in rural China. So one, there's more than half of the Chinese live in countryside. When the rural China set up the collectives, regenerate the collective organizations, it means that the half of China can carry out the social enterprises regeneration successfully. So originally in the beginning of the 1980s, when China restarted their so-called the private industrialization in the city, they released control to encourage this private to set up the individual enterprises. But in countryside, most of these collective village, they set up the collective industries, and then they benefit all the members, all the villagers in the village. So we have a long-term history, maintain our socialist featured collective enterprises. Most of these rural enterprises still can be in name of the social enterprises. At that time, we have so many village elites. They are social entrepreneurial. They also the leaders of the village public affairs. So we are not separate the public administrative affairs and economic affairs. We still put as together as a social enterprises, as a kind of social enterprises means mobilize the social resources, and then to mobilize almost all the members to join the rural industrialization for the self-management and self-development. So if you think about the rural China's so-called socialist development, you can see that since 1950s until now, we have more than 70 years socialist construction experiences. So from the outside, a lot of Western scholars, they don't have the chance to go inside, to go into the village. So they only have some experiences or carry out their studies in the urban area. So they may think, okay, the whole China became a kind of exactly capitalist country, and then they join the capitalist competition and so on and so. But they don't have the knowledge about the countryside, about the rural China. So let me emphasize my key points. I mean, that's the third key points to you, that we still keep our historical institutions. Traditional institution in rural China is for 1,000 years organized by the common people, by the villagers. We organize as a kind of group in the village. We're still working for the long histories sustainability. So that is the real China. Real China means more than 5,000 years we don't have to break down our own history. We still keep it as a kind of sustainable development model. So if we think about the social enterprises, it's working for the social social aim, for the social sustainability, to mobilize the social enterprises for social development. That is a lot of experiences in rural China. You may come to see it, so you can have the comparative study. Nowadays, we will publish a new book created by my team. Now we have several study teams. Now this new book is in name of Social Enterprises in Rural China. Thank you very much. I finish.
Thank you very much, Professor Wen, for that very informative history lesson and the experiences of rural China. With your permission, we'd like to open the floor for questions if there are any. Is that okay, Professor?
Okay, how many minutes?
Just a few minutes, depending on the number of questions.
Okay, okay.
We already have one question here. It's from Anastasia Karina from Indonesia. My question for Professor Wen, according to his explanation that social entrepreneurs in the South countries are different with Western textbooks, what is your advice for young people if they learn from many kinds of sources, particularly from different references?
Thank you. It's a good question. You know that we have organized more than 200 universities in 20 provinces in China, mobilized them organized as a small team, going down to the countryside to carry out the investigations. So that is for more than 30 years. So these students nowadays became a kind of very so-called very active in different sectors. So they carry out their investigations and then to create their knowledge, and now they're working for the social affairs, and then they became a kind of key persons and local elites for the social enterprises. So when we trying to do some studies, we need to have a team. These are teams. They are not just take the knowledge from the textbook. The textbook in our South countries, especially in our South countries scholarship societies, we mainly duplicate from the Western textbook. But if you can organize the young students going down to the countryside, they may totally change their mind. They may have a kind of new chance for set up their own knowledge, and then they work for the social development, for the social enterprises. So we can widen our concept, not just narrow. And then we can just take the knowledge from our own investigation, from our own knowledge base, not just duplicate this textbook. So it's more easy just going down to carry out your investigation, carry out your field work, and then you may have a new knowledge. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Professor Wen. There's another question here. What steps should be taken to initiate new traditional social institutions that are very feudal and patriarchal? What steps should be taken to initiate new traditional social institutions that are where traditional social institutions are very feudal and patriarchal? Meaning to say, how do we initiate new institutions considering that a lot of institutions are very traditional and patriarchal and perhaps maybe old in their view?
Okay, so if you can if you just can going down, and then you may stay in the village, and you can find a lot of local people. They have a very rich local knowledge and rich historical experiences. And then when you close to them, you just take this local knowledge from them, and then you may set up this new institution, and then you can collect a lot of local raw materials, and then join the discussion for the new institution built up by the government's groups. And then if you do some historical studies, and then you close to these so-called practical studies scholar, you also can take the knowledge from them for as a kind of raw materials for the new institution construction. So we have a many way for understand history or understand the modern currencies, current situation. And then you put most of these raw materials as a kind of study. And then you organize the discussion. And then you may have a lot of new knowledge created by different groups. So nowadays in China, we have many local groups working in the local field work. So we use the online discussion to make them to exchange their experiences and their raw materials. And finally, most of these contribution can be accepted by the central policy studies. And then you may give the influence to the central. That is nowadays I'm very busy in such kind of communication in the policy studies. So we need to take more from the local, and then you may have the right policy for develop the local. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wen. Very wise advice. There's another question here. Could you please explain the difference between cooperatives and social enterprises in rural China?
Different cooperatives because of the different local. You know that it's a very big continental country. And then every local, they have their own culture. So that is why I emphasize, if you do want to have the knowledge, if you do want to do the studies on social enterprises, you'd better carry out the field work in different local. So as a kind of intellectual, originally we don't have the knowledge, and we need to learn from local, from different culture. And then when the more you have your local knowledge, the more you think that you can do some combination. I mean, to put them together, and then you can do some studies. So for me, as a senior person, these are almost 50 years, my knowledge, not exactly from the textbooks, but from the local investigation, from the local people. So that is why I several times emphasize going down to local, to close to people, and then you can have your own knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for reiterating learning about the local context and adjusting to that as we operate. There's another question here. What do you think of the concept of social solidarity? Hang on, the question box.
It's very good.
Concept of social solidarity economy promoted by scholars of social enterprises in the South with no socialist experience.
I mean, the most critical issue in our South countries for setting up the social solidarity for the social enterprise is that how that we regain our sovereignty on the local resources. You may know that China carried out the land reform several times in 20th centuries. And then by the land reform or land revolution, and we have two things very important. The first is almost all land belong to people. Every household equally share the land in the village. No matter how many family members, you have equal rights until now. So that means that the local resources controlled by local people themselves, they have a local sovereignty on their resources. That is when they want to set up the social enterprises, they have at least the properties. Now when we're trying to regenerate the local collective as a kind of new institution, we also emphasize all the members in village. If you want to emphasize the human rights, what is exactly the basic human rights? You do have the rights to take your part from the properties in your village. So no matter it's a wood, or it's a land, or it's water, or it's whatever, all the natural resources belong to village, belong to villager. Every people have the rights. That is when you want to set up the social enterprise, when we want to develop, you need to have your own resources sovereignty. That is the base for build up the social solidarity. That is one thing. Second, when China carried out the revolution in 1949, almost all the imperialist countries' properties taken by state. No matter you're a transnational company or you're a bureaucratic company, whatever, or in name of revolution, all the properties belong to the whole people, belong to state. That is exactly important because by that, you set up your national solidarity for your national economic resources. No matter it's money, or it's machine, or it's building, whatever, all not belong to this transnational company, no pay. So that is also very important. That is also very hateful for this imperialist country. They hate China. They think that you exploit our properties. So, but it's if you have no revolution, you have no such kind of sovereignty. It's also the social justice. When you talk about the rights, that means whole people, it's a billion people, they all have a share of such kind of whole people's ownership by taken from this transnational company, from this imperialism. That is different. So that's why, you know, our intellectuals like me that are still working for such kind of central policy studies, because that I think this benefits whole people. I have my social justice. I think that's just justice. So that is why I still, even that I'm senior person, I'm old enough, but still work for what? For the whole people's benefits. That is what I need to tell you, that if you want to set up the social solidarity, you want to have a sustainability, you want to have safety, you need to pay attention to what is the basic property rights. And then that is also the basic human rights. Thank you.
Thank you for your insights, Professor. We have one last question before we end this session. And that is, what will be the roles of central government or outside the community to promote social enterprises? Should it be locally financed and there's no need for support from the outside?
Certainly that they need to finance, I mean, the local need to finance by the central budget. Since the 2005, before that, we have a so-called county responsibility, means that county governments need to take responsibility for the whole rural people's social welfare and education and the medical service and whatever, but it's not enough. So since the year 2005, the central take the responsibility. Nowadays, almost every rural people's education needs and the medical service and the social welfare all financed by the central budget. So the central budget set up a kind of account, budget account at the county government's level and in charge of all the rural needs. No matter you build up your pavement road, you want to repair the river, or you want to do the Wi-Fi in the village. So nowadays, we have 5 communication built up in the local village. That is a pavement road, pipe water, and electricity, and Wi-Fi, and also the so-called broadcastings. And oh no, the gas, I mean the oil, gas. And these are 5 communication, all built up in the village, all paid by the central budget. So central budget have very heavy debts for building up these public affairs, for the infrastructure constructions. So that is a big change during these 20 years, since these are 15 years, since 2005. Nowadays, we have almost 20 trillion construction fees from the central and the provincial level financed into the countryside, into the local villages. So almost all the village now, 99% of the households in countryside can enjoy the electricity. 98% of the natural village now set up the pavement road. More than 95% of the water irrigation system repaired. So that is nowadays, we said it's a new countryside construction, and then followed by rural revitalization. It means large number of the finance invest into the infrastructure construction and also the social constructions. So that is big change. Nowadays in the countryside, we almost have 100 or several hundred trillions as properties. So now we need to regenerate the collectives to make these several hundred trillions properties into old households, make them have an equal rights. Then they become shareholders of the collective, and then collective can have the so-called debt financing from this bank in the county level, and then county level's bank can have the finance from the central. Then we have a big so-called internal circle. When we're facing the challenge of United States and the Western countries want to attack, not military attack, they want economic attack to block China. We need to think about how this big continental country have a so-called self-development by internal cycle. That is when you build up a lot of so-called properties in the countryside, you can initiate by your new institutional reform. So that is a very important phenomenon. If you have interest on such kind of affairs, you can do some studies through Professor Lan Ying Zhang, because she speaks very good English than I. So maybe that she can help you to understand what is our studies in China, also the comparative studies in the international. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wen. That's actually all the time we have for questions. May I request everyone to turn on their video so that we can take a photo for this morning session?
Okay.
Gomer, your signal, please.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Professor Wen. We're just waiting for everyone to turn on their videos. The ISAIA technical team is now capturing our photos together.
Sure.
Give it a few minutes.
Okay.
Big smiles, guys. Thank you.
Okay.
A few more clicks. We're just making sure that we're covering all 5 pages of those participating. And I think we're good. Thank you very much. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you,
Thank you again, Professor Wen. 谢谢.
谢谢. Thank you.